All right, let's get started. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for our Technical Assistance Informational webinar for the New Innovator Award. So, a few quick housekeeping notes. The webinar is being recorded, and we will make the recording available on our website for your reviewing or for sharing with others sometime within the next 2 weeks or so. We will also make the slides available on the website for you to download. If you have questions that we do not get to, please feel free to contact us via the New Innovator mailbox. And the email address is listed on the slide. If you look to the bottom right, you should see the email address there. For today's webinar, please use the chat box if you are having any issues, or if you would like to introduce yourself, you can also use the chat box for that. Please use the Q&A box if you have questions. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, I would love to introduce our panelists. I am Makiba Charles Allende, and I am a Health Science Policy Analyst with the Office of the Director. We also have as our master slide controller, Becky Miller, and Becky is a program officer, also in the Office of the Director. We have Ravi Basavappa, and Ravi is our program leader of the High Risk, High Reward program, where the New Innovator Award is housed. We are very fortunate. We have Eugene Garcia, and we are lucky to have Gene, as I will call him, join us. He is the branch chief in the Center of Scientific Review, and he sort of governs the review process. We are expecting that we will also have Imo Okun join us, and Imo is a scientific review officer in the Center of Scientific Review as well. And to wrap up our panelists, we have Ellie Murcia, and Ellie is a program specialist in the Office of the Director, and she keeps us on task to make sure that we complete all the necessary paperwork, have our ducks in order so that we can bring these opportunities to you. So let's go ahead and get started. We will start with an overview of the Common Fund, which is in the Office of the Director. And the Common Fund is run in the Office of Strategic Coordination. And what is truly special about the Common Fund is that we create programs that are meant to address major scientific roadblocks that require a trans-NIH approach or response. So looking at our programs at a glance, we can separate them really into about 4 buckets that you see on this colorful slide. So if you look at the data, tools, and methods bucket, you'll find programs such as Bridge to Artificial Intelligence or Bridge to AI. And that program intends to generate data sets and best practices for machine learning analysis. We also have the Gabriella Miller Kids First Pediatric Research Program, or Kids First is the shortened version. And that is developing a large-scale database of clinical and genetic data from patients with childhood cancers and structural birth defects, as well as their families. So if we also look at the new paradigms bucket, we have, for instance, the Physical Activity Consortium, and that consortium is looking at the impact of physical activity on the body. We know exercise is good for you, but what is actually happening in the body that makes it so good? Looking at the clinical partnerships bucket, we have the Undiagnosed Diseases Network, and that brings together a lot of stakeholders. So patients, clinicians, scientists, all so that they can work together so they can diagnose rare diseases. We're basically building a network of folks that can work collaboratively to move the needle on a major roadblock. And then lastly, but not least, we have the transformative workforce support bucket. And that's where the new Innovator Award program sits under the High Risk, High Reward program. Next slide. So the reason why this is all so important is that these programs may have funding opportunities available to you specifically if there are programs that are relevant to your scientific area, but also because a marked number of these programs make freely accessible to you data and instruments, reagents, protocols. So we highly recommend that you visit the Common Fund website at commonfund.nih.gov to learn more about these additional opportunities. So, next slide. These programs are all really fantastic, but today we are here to share more about the High Risk, High Reward program. The High Risk, High Reward program, next slide, has 4 initiatives. So the Pioneer Award, the New Innovator Award, the Transformative Research Award, as well as the Early Independence Award. Now, all 4 of these have annual funding opportunities that tend to be released in the spring, and they have closing deadlines somewhere in August or September. So what that basically means is that there are 4 funding opportunities that are open to applications right now. So next slide. Each of these awards have nuances to make eligibility different. However, in all 4 of them, we are looking for high risk and high impact ideas. Next slide. We also do not require preliminary data or detailed experimental plans. And please trust us when we say to you that we do not need preliminary data to apply for these programs. We recognize that if you have an innovative or an out-of-the-box idea, you may not have the data to support that idea. Now, feasibility is still important, but you do not have to have the experiments already done or the data available when you submit. Next slide. We welcome any topic relevant to the NIH mission. So we know that can be a broad umbrella. So basically, we are looking for topics related to behavioral sciences, social sciences, applied, the more formal sciences, basic, translational, or clinical research. And we are always trying to expand our portfolio. So if you look at our website and you see previously funded projects, and you don't see anything that may align or fits into your scientific area or what you're interested in studying, please do not be discouraged by that. We just may not have found your idea or found you yet. So provided that it falls within the NIH mission and you meet the eligibility, please apply. Next slide. We should also mention that we recognize that great science comes from a variety of backgrounds. So we highly encourage applications from scientists from diverse backgrounds, institutions, and as I mentioned before, scientific areas. So if you are coming from an institution that is a more teaching focused institution or a private laboratory, we welcome applications from all eligible institutions. Next slide. Before I go any further, I'd like to take a second to just recognize our NIH High Risk, High Reward Working Group. We have representatives from almost every institute and center. These are the people that make it possible for us to run such a large program. And because it is truly a trans NIH initiative, we rely heavily on their expertise in helping us to manage the program and to give us direction. So enough of me talking. I would like to hand over to Ravi so he can dive deeper specifically into the New Innovator Award program. Ravi, over to you.
Thank you very much, Makiba, for the introduction, for providing an overview of the Common Fund and for the High Risk, High Reward Research Program. In general, I also like to welcome Dr. Imo Oken, who's been able to join the panel. I'm glad the technical issues have been resolved. Welcome, Imo.
Thank you.
So I will talk in more detail, as Makiba said, about the New Innovator Award Initiative. The overall objective of the New Innovator Award Initiative is to support early career stage scientists who already have established a track record of unusual levels of innovation, and who, going forward, propose something that's really very innovative and highly impactful. The New Innovator Award Initiative was started in 2007. In spirit, it's very similar to the Pioneer Award, something that you may have heard of, but this is limited to early career stage investigators. We define early stage investigator as one who has had no substantial NIH grant as a PI and is still within 10 years of receipt of the doctoral degree or completion of clinical training. Clinical training now includes the fellowship period as well. New Innovator awardees are expected or required to commit at least 25% research effort. An important distinction here is that we consider only research effort. We do not count effort toward clinical duties, teaching duties, or administrative duties toward this effort, only research effort. The awards are, the award level is $1.5 million dispersed in 2 multi-year segments, and this is an important change from previous years. I'll explain a little bit more about this change later. It uses the DP2 activity code, so you may have heard the DP2 used colloquially to mean the New Innovator Award. The other institutes at NIH also use the DP2 activity code now, so here we mean the New Innovator Award. Next slide, please. When we started the New Innovator Award program, we wanted to make it distinct from the conventional NIH R01 application and review process and administration, make it as distinct as possible from conventional R01 sort of funding. So for example, for the New Innovator Award application, we use a very different application package. There is no specific aims page for the New Innovator Award application, although there is one for the standard R01 application. For the New Innovator Award application, the research strategy section here is called a research strategy essay, and I'll elaborate on that a bit more later. But this is limited to 10 pages, whereas the R01 research strategy section is limited to 12 pages. The 10-page essay is the primary component of the application. And here, this is, as I'll explain, pretty much a vision statement of what the PI hopes to accomplish in the project period with that level of funding and have maximum impact on science. For the biosketch, only the PI's biosketch is allowed. Biosketches of collaborators or other key personnel, they are not allowed. It's only the biosketch of the PI. And that's because the New Innovator Award is in many respects a person-based award, much more so than a conventional R01. The budget, there's no detailed budget is allowed. As I'll explain later, we ask you to request $1.5 million through the detailed budget pages. Equipment, you do not need to use. Letters of support, you cannot use. Resource sharing plan, do not use. If an award seems imminent, then the resource sharing plan will be requested as just-in-time information. Other components and forms used when appropriate, such as authentication of key biological chemical resources. If you're using animals, vertebrate animals, then you need to complete the vertebrate animal section. For human subjects, if you're using them, you need to include that corresponding section, and biohazards as well, if you're using biohazardous materials. But I'd like to underscore what's written in red near the top of the slide. So, but in other respects, you need to follow the SF 424 application guide instructions. The FOA only lists how the application instructions deviate from the standard instructions. If there's no specific deviation that's described in the FOA, then you need to use the SF 424 instructions as a default set of instructions. Next slide, please. So a bit more about the research strategy essay. It's 10 pages, and we ask here that you address these points of programmatic interest explicitly. First, you need to include the project science areas, and I think that Jean and Emo will describe what those are. Then project description. So describe the scientific importance of the topic in which you're submitting your application. Then describe the overall approach to be taken. Preliminary data are not required, but accepted, and that's really true. People have not provided any data at all and succeeded in getting the award. Most people provide some data, and if they are provided, then they will be evaluated. And most people provide some data to just what I call give a glimmer of hope that whatever is being proposed can actually be achieved. There is, but providing extensive supporting data can actually be counterproductive, because then the reviewers may say, hey, everything looks very feasible. This is better suited for a standard R01 than the New Innovator Award. In the FOA, we provide instructions that we recommend you state prominently in this essay that you are not providing substantial preliminary data or a detailed experimental plan because the FOA instructs you not to do so. And providing such a statement, I think, helps the applicants get a sense of the spirit of the program, but as importantly, if not more importantly, we think such a statement helps to keep the reviewers on track. It's easy for the R01 for the reviewers to slip into the R01 mindset and start looking for details and data. But if it's stated in the essay, hey, this is a New Innovator Award application, it's not a standard R01. And so per the FOA instructions, I'm not providing a lot of details or data. Then the reviewers reading that will say, oh yeah, this is not a New Innovator. I mean, this is not a R01 application. This is a New Innovator Award application. And then they'll de-emphasize their expectations for data and details. That being said, though, you still need to provide sufficient evidence that you've thought deeply about the proposal, that, for example, you've thought about what you think are the riskiest elements, that you have thought of alternate approaches in case these risky aspects don't work out as hoped. You also need to convince the reviewers that you will follow the research in a very rigorous and robust manner. For example, if you are planning to use human subjects or animal subjects in the essay, you should include an estimate of the number of subjects that you plan to use, that you consider some sort of power analysis. And if you're using sex as a biological variable, if that's appropriate, that should be stated in the essay as well. In the essay, we're asking you to explicitly address innovativeness. You should provide a compelling argument of why what's being proposed is exceptionally innovative. We also ask you to address investigator qualifications. What makes you so eminently qualified for the highly innovative research that you're proposing? We ask you to address the suitability for the New Innovator Award program. Describe why this proposal is really high risk, high reward in nature and not better suited for more conventional NIH funding. Statement of research effort commitment. You are required to state that you'll commit at least 25% research effort toward the New Innovator Award project. Also, we recommend that you include what you think are the most critical citations. You may use a citation form that's abbreviated as long as the source can be uniquely identified. But please note that that whatever citations you do provide in the essay still need to fit within the 10-page limit. Next slide, please. So some points to consider when you're drafting your research strategy essay. Given the review process, as Jean and Emo will elaborate on, the Be sure that what you write can be easily appreciated by people who are well outside the field for exceptional innovation and potential for unusually broad impact. This is because not all the reviewers will be experts in what you're proposing. Many people will be well outside the field of your scientific interest. So they need to be able to get it pretty easily why what you're proposing is so innovative and potentially so impactful. After reading your application, they should go, oh, wow, that is so cool. I get it. I understand where he or she is coming from and why this really could establish a new paradigm, could change the game. So in doing this, then it may be helpful to begin your essay with a description of the landscape of the field. What is the state of art? What is the current status of understanding? Where are the current boundaries? And in that context, then describe why what you're proposing will push well past those boundaries. Ease the reader into the jargon of the field. Again, not all the reviewers will be experts in the field, so ease the reader into the language of the field. Don't assume that the reviewers will have the same level of expertise in your topic as you might expect for a standard R1 review. And the thought deeply about the project, that you've identified, again, the risky elements, and you've thought of alternate approaches. You need to convince the reviewer that the research will be performed robustly and rigorously. You can't say, I'm going to cure cancer, or I'm going to figure out how mitosis works. You need to back it up with something that's pretty compelling in terms of compelling logic as your premise. Next slide, please. So some important information about the budget periods. This is a pretty substantial change from previous years. Previously, all the money was given in the first year of the award. It was multi-year funded, so all the money for the entire approximately 5-year project period was dispersed at the beginning and could be spent as needed over the approximately 5-year project period. And we're shifting that now due to changes in HHS and NIH policy to conform with the recent policy changes. Then the awards will be made in 2 multi-year funded segments. The first segment will be for the first 3 years, and the second segment will be for the final 2 years, years 4 and 5. This means that no cost extensions beyond the initial 5-year project period will be allowed. Previously, no cost extensions were not allowed because of regulations about how quickly the multi-year funded funds could be spent. But given the 2-segment awarding scheme, now you can ask for no cost extensions from the second funding segment. And I think this will provide some relief to the new innovator awardees, especially in circumstances like the pandemic. In the past couple of years, some new innovator awardees found difficulty in spending the award money in time, and some exceptions had to be made to provide additional flexibilities to them. Next slide, please. So with this change in the award scheme, in the application, you are now required to complete annual budget pages, 1 budget page for each of the 5 years of the proposed project period. But to help maintain budget flexibility, only the minimum information is requested. Previously, all we asked for you in terms of budget was saying that you wanted $1.5 million. We didn't ask any questions after that, and you couldn't provide any additional information. Beginning with this FOA, the applicants are required to provide annual budgets, but we still want to provide some flexibility in how the awardees spend their money during the project period. So I'll explain a bit more about how we plan to accomplish that. The budgets have the following. So when you do complete the budget pages, please do keep these 2 important constraints in mind. For the first segment, that is for the first 3 years, 9/1/2022 through 8/31/2025, the total direct cost that you request must not exceed $900,000. So this averages to $300,000 per year. But with the total, you can ask for more or less. in any given year in the first 3 years, but the total direct cost must not exceed $900,000. There's a similar constraint for the final 2 years, proportional constraint. For the second segment, that is for 9/1/2025 through 8/31/2027, the total direct cost must not exceed $600,000 indirectly. So which averages out again to $300,000 per year in direct costs. Next slide, please. So we'll get into the weeds a little bit about the budget pages then to help you, since this is so different. So, and these instructions are also given in the FOA, but we can walk through them quickly. So in the budget R&R section, you're first asked to select the appropriate budget type. And here you could click on or select project. Then, thank you. And then provide the budget period start date and end date in the other yellow boxes there. Thank you. The first budget period you would enter would be 9/1/2022, and the end date would be 8/31/2023. In section 3, then, provide your name and the appropriate level of effort, but enter 0 for your requested salary and 0 for your requested fringe benefits. Don't worry, you can still get salary support and fringe benefit support through the New Innovator Award here. This is only a way to use the budget pages in a fashion that still keeps maximum flexibility for the awardees. So just enter 0 for your salary, 0 for fringe benefits here. And you don't need to provide any other information for any other key personnel or other personnel. So you don't need to complete section B. Next slide, please. In section C, you must enter a budget request for equipment for that budget year. Thank you. And if you're using, if you're requesting equipment, then you need to provide a budget justification per the usual SF 424 instructions. Next slide, please. And you don't need to fill the next couple of sections. Finally, in section F, add a line for other direct costs. Next, can you click, please? Yes. There, in that field, enter requested direct costs, and there provide the total direct cost for that budget period. So if you're not requesting any equipment that year and you want to use the average direct cost for your award, then you would enter $300,000 here. Again, if you're this line item does not include equipment. So if you're not including any equipment for that budget year and you're averaging the budgets over the 5 years, then you would enter $300,000 a year. But you do have the flexibility to request more or less for any given year, as long as you don't violate the 2 constraints. Those 2 constraints, again, are for years 1 through 3, the direct costs must total less than $900,000. And for years 4 and 5, the total direct cost must sum to $600,000 or less. And you need to do this for each of the 5 years. Okay. Next slide, please. Another important information is that be sure to use the Forms F revised application package. This is hot off the press yesterday. This notice was published yesterday. We realized that the original Forms F application package did not provide access to the budget pages. So in response, the Forms F revised application package has been issued. Please be sure to use the Forms F revised application package. This will allow you to use the budget pages as is necessary to submit an application successfully this year. And please also be sure to read all the FOA instructions carefully and comply with those instructions. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'll hand it over to Jean and Dimo.
Emo is jumping on here as well.
Yep.
There we go. So welcome everybody. It's our pleasure to again lead the review of DP2 for this year. We're coming to you from the Center for Scientific Review. Dr. Okono and I are both from the Cardiovascular and Respiratory Sciences IRG over there. So that's just to say that that's the home base for this review. So if you're not submitting an application that has heart or lungs involved with it, please don't despair. That's just the home base for the review. Emo? Emo will introduce himself and then go forward.
Welcome to Emo Okon, and I'm running this DP2 alongside the next slide, please. Thank you. So
looks like you may be freezing a little bit. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it freezes every now and then, but I think you're fine.
Okay,
now.
sorry about that. Yeah. So I mean, the process actually begins with you, the applicant. You know, as you well know, your application comes through your institution. Hopefully, this gets in sometime on or before late August.
Emo, you may want to turn off your video.
Undergoes a two-stage. I'm breaking off.
You're breaking up a little bit. Ravi was suggesting that you turn off your video, maybe, and leave your sound on. That might be.
Okay. So
okay, there you go.
Okay, so it's a two.
You can go now. Oh.
We will go into a bit more detail in the next few slides. Suffice to say,
I think that we're breaking up here, Vicky.
Of all applications.
Emo, I think you're breaking up.
Stage, the editorial panel. Moving from that, yep.
I think you're breaking up. We're hearing like every third word.
Right. So, Gene, why don't you?
Let me go ahead. Yeah. Very good. As Emo mentioned, it begins with the applicant. Applications come to us. We receive them in late August, and we begin the two-stage process of review. Stage one involves mail-in reviewers assigned to each of the abundance of all applications that we receive. And at the end of the stage one process, the top scoring applications are determined to be finalists, and these finalists will be able to then move forward to stage two. And stage two meets in front of an editorial board of a select number of reviewers, and they meet in a meeting for discussion of all the finalist applications. It's the finalist applications and the discussion in the editorial board where we get final scores there. After the final scores come through, they go to the advisory board, the advisory council, and it's called the Council of Councils. Only a name that you get in the federal government. The Council of Councils meets in May to determine the awardees, and the selection of the awardees are made by the Office of the Director and individual institutes and centers that select the high-scoring applications. The awards, the winners are announced, or the awardees are announced through public announcements sometime in September. And they go back to the institution. Next slide, please. Emo, we can try you again. Maybe I'll go through this slide, and then we'll try you once again for the next slide. The peer review process, the stage one, or as we begin the stage one, all applications are assigned to one panel. That panel is housed in the cardiovascular and respiratory sciences IRG. I know that we've gotten a number of concerning emails before, wondering that there must be in the wrong study section because they're not doing CBRS type of applications. This is just where this entire application or this entire panel is being housed. When we receive all application, an administrative review is made, and that checks for the completion, the completeness of your applications, and probably more importantly, the eligibility, the ESI eligibility of each of the applicants. Sometimes we get applicants that do not show that they are ESIs when indeed they are. And that crisis can be averted if you go into your ERA Commons account and make sure that you have all the information of yourself uploaded so that the system does realize that you indeed are an early stage investigator. So you can get that done prior to submitting your application. Applications are grouped they're grouped based on the areas of science as identified by the applicant. We'll show you in the next in one of the next slides how we do that. You identify the areas of science using one of the 9 areas of science coded, 9 areas that are coded in the funding that are presented in the funding opportunity announcement in section 4. There are 9 separate areas listed. The specific instructions ask everyone to provide a primary and secondary number there. Those 2 numbers, in conjunction with our determination of your area of science, is how we assign reviewers to your application. Potential conflicts of interest will be considered for each of the applications, and these conflicts of interest can either be institutional or collaborative or otherwise. These mail-in reviewers that we use for the stage 1 reviewers will be recruited to cover all representative areas of science. They will come from all sorts of institutions. They will be essentially as diverse as the applications and applicants that we receive. Next slide. Ima, do you want to try again?
Yeah, let's hope.
Okay.
Doesn't freeze this time. Hello?
If you started talking, we missed a few words. Try again. Okay, it seems like we're having some issues with your sound there. Let me go ahead and continue here. The peer review process for stage 1, these are getting mail reviewers. We recruit a panel of mail reviewers, and we match the reviewers with the science, and we assign 3 reviewers per application. We have evaluation with 3 criteria and an overall impact score. The criteria that we use to evaluate the applications are these 3 criteria: the importance and potential impact of the scientific problem, the novelty and innovativeness of the approach, and the creative potential of this early stage investigator. The reviewers will evaluate your application in terms of those core criteria and assemble their overall impact into an overall impact paragraph that which is accompanied by an overall impact score. Next slide, please. The selection of finalists for stage 2. Can everyone hear me okay? Everybody?
Yes, we
Yes,
can.
Gene, we can hear you.
Good,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you. Okay, good. A selection of finalists for stage 2. The selection is based on the rank order by the mail-in reviewers. In other words, we after the stage one review, the intention is, or the goal is to be able to discuss the top, let's say 20% of all applications. The top 20% of all applications will be considered our finalists. So what goes into becoming a finalist? It's about 80% of that 20% are actually based on the scores. The top group of high scoring applications will go over to become finalists. Then about 20% of the finalists come by way of what we call unbiased selection of applications by editorial reviewers. The reviewers will go in and select applications that may have two very strong scores and one not so strong score, or something along those lines. But after reading the application, they consider this application worthy of becoming a finalist. So it's this unbiased selection of applications that can then be moved on to become a finalist. Okay, next slide, please. Which leads us to the editorial review. The editorial board consists of between around 25 to possibly 30 panelists, senior member. These consist of senior members of the scientific community. These are experts within a broad scientific range, of broad understanding. These are broadly thinking scientists. Each finalist application is assigned 3 stage 2, or what we call editor reviewers. All finalist applications will be discussed. We're not discussing 50% of these top 110. We're discussing all of the finalist applications that go through. Scoring is focused on impact and innovation. Impact can come via the 3 core criteria that they're evaluating. Together, they make up a high impact and highly innovative application. Each of the assigned reviewers, editorial reviewers, provides an impact statement and an impact score. The release of these final scores is done for all applications. They're not all going to be the same. The discussed statements, the ones that are finalists, the ones that were discussed by the editorial board, will receive this second stage impact statements with a resume and a summary of discussion. And the not discussed applications, the applicants will be able to see the stage 1 critiques that they received for their applications. Okay, next slide, please. So, as always, you can contact us should you have any questions about the process, and that'll do it. Thank you, Ravi. And I'm sorry that Emo couldn't speak a little bit more over here.
Yeah, sorry, Emo. Even the webinar for this initiative is high risk.
Thank you. Thank you both. We will now move on to the question and answer section of the webinar. So prior to the webinar, we received questions through the New Innovator inbox. So we have those that are ready to go. If you have additional questions, please add them to the Q&A box. I've already seen that some questions have started coming in. We will try our best to get to them if time permits. As I mentioned earlier, if we do not get to them, please email them to us and we will be sure to get an answer out to you. So the email address is on the slide, bottom right. Okay, so we will answer these questions in some buckets. First category is eligibility. So question number 1. Can I extend my early stage investigator status, and who do I contact to do it? Ravi.
Yes, you can request an extension in your ESI status. And to do that, you should go to your ERA Commons account there, and I think in the PI profile, you'll see an education section there. There'll be a link to request extension. So it's all done online.
Great. And following up on that, Ravi, if we weren't able to start our independent research lab when originally planned due to COVID, is there a possibility to extend ESI or early stage investigator status at NIH due to that?
You certainly could try. So go ahead and fill out the ESI extension form and explain the reasons. And there is a committee within NIH that will evaluate all the requests and use standard principles in providing responses.
Okay, so I'm going to jump over to Jean or Emo. I'm not sure if you got your technical stuff sorted out, but either one of you jump in. Question. Am I still eligible if I've had a K or an F award?
Absolutely. I think that the key thing here is that you are an early stage investigator. And so the status of early stage investigator means that once you receive a substantial NIH award, which is essentially an R01, then you're not eligible anymore. Anything other than that, or the typical ones other than that, the K awards, the F awards, you are still an early stage investigator. Therefore, you're still eligible.
Okay, Jean, so I'm going to follow up with a question because you mentioned R01s.
Yeah.
Am I still eligible if I have early stage investigator status and have an R01 application pending?
Pending. The key here is your status now. As you are applying, if you don't have an R01, you're hopeful to get an R01, but you don't have an R01, yes, you're still eligible.
Okay,
Even if it's
Ravi.
Let me expand on that a little bit. Yeah, no, that's totally correct. So at the time of application, you should have early career stage investigator status. However, if you lose your early stage investigator status because you do receive substantial NIH funding, and the list of those awards, NIH awards that don't terminate ESI status is listed on the NIH website. If you just use your favorite search engine and look up ESI NIH, pretty soon you should find a link to the list of awards that don't remove your ESI status. And this list of awards that don't disqualify you from ESI status are things like R15s, R03s, the K awards and F awards, and a few other smaller awards. But to get back to this, so if you don't use, if you lose your ESI status because you get another substantial NIH award, then you automatically become ineligible for the New Innovator Award. However, if you lose your ESI status simply because the time window has exceeded that allowed for ESI status, then you're still eligible. We only care in that regard for your ESI status at the time of application, not at the time of award.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ravi. I'm going to stick with you, Ravi, for this one. Are postdocs eligible to apply?
Yes, they are eligible to apply, but you should consult with your intended host institution to ensure that they will be able to provide the necessary infrastructure and resources for you to conduct your research. You should have these clearance from your host institution to be able to submit applications such as R01 applications to the NIH, and you need to have an independent position established by September 1st, 2022. So your position needs to start on or before September 1st, 2022.
Jean, I'm going to come over to you. Are projects in behavioral and social sciences competitive? Is there bias in their awarding rate?
We've not seen that. We've not seen any bias. We can tell you that the numbers haven't. There's been other areas of science that have achieved higher numbers than the biobehavioral sciences, and we would be eager to receive more coming in. But the ones that we get, the funding or the success rate there are on par, maybe a little bit more than the other types of disciplines that we have there. So it's numbers that we're looking for.
Okay, so I have a question that came in for clarification, Ravi, for something that you said. If the applicant receives the R01 while the DP2 is pending, then they will no longer be eligible. In other words, one cannot be awarded both a DP2 and an R01 simultaneously. Is that correct?
It's a nuanced argument, a nuanced situation here. So if the R01 is awarded before the DP2 can be awarded, then automatically the investigator becomes ineligible for the new innovator award. However, in certain cases, it turns out that the new innovator award can be issued before the R01 becomes active. That situation is allowed where the DP2 notice of award is issued before the R01 becomes active. The converse is not allowed, where the R01 becomes active before the DP2.
So one direction versus the other.
Yes.
Okay, a question for you, Jean. Can proposed projects cover both basic and applied aims, or are successful proposals more likely to stick to one or the other?
I can tell you that successful proposals are ones where, of the three core criteria that the reviewers are looking at, the ones that get them the most excited, the ones where they feel that it's an important and significant topic that's being addressed, and that the innovativeness of the approach and the strategy is there, and the innovativeness of the PI of the applicant is clear to everybody. So that's what makes it successful. The fact we've seen lots of different types of applications. So to answer your question directly, I think it's not necessarily basic versus translational, but it's the way that you present it, the way that you can get these reviewers excited about thinking that it's a high risk, high reward type of application. Does that? I hope that helps. I didn't want to punt it, but that's really what it is.
Yeah, you're welcome to punt at any time. Ravi can always add to what you've said, but I think that covers it. Next question. Ravi, is it okay for a person to be exploring an area outside their expertise if it's a next reasonable step for their work?
Definitely. That's actually encouraged to some extent. We don't, applications that propose the next expected steps, a logical extension of what the investigator has been doing, tend to not do so well in review. It's those that pose a leap for the investigator as well as the field that tend to do better in review. So something that's of a stretch, but you can still provide compelling arguments that you would be able to accomplish the research either through the help of collaborators. I think is that sort of application is encouraged.
Okay, Jean, how important is it to have a track record that covers the entire scope of the proposed project to be competitive? Can collaborators be used to fill gaps?
I think I think Ravi touched on this before. I think that say the first part of the question again.
Sure. How important is it to have a track record that covers the entire scope of the proposed project in order for you to be competitive? Or can you use collaborators?
I think track record, with early stage investigators, we typically don't see a lengthy track record here. We get, the reviewers will see a glimpse into their training and how they've applied their training to their previous research. And so putting together in a logical way what they intend on doing and using evidence from the literature, what they call rigor of prior research, to be able to, or whatever means to essentially convince the reviewers that this is going to be a meaningful and successful product. That's the main thing. Indeed, assembling collaborators to help. Again, the only bio sketches that can be put in is your own bio sketch. However, names of collaborators should be added or can be mentioned in the essay, the 10-page essay, to show that you're covering areas and learning from others in terms of putting this together. Also, it's important to remember that adding collaborators to the assignment request form is also important for review, so that we can see that these collaborators are involved in your project and they shouldn't be used as reviewers for your application. So it helps us with the conflicts of interest as well.
And if I may add a bit to that. So regarding collaborators, it's, as Jean said, it's totally fine to add collaborators and mention them in your essay to provide expertise, but it should be clear to the reviewers that the collaborators are there to provide expertise that complements yours, that it shouldn't be conceived as a team science project that's being proposed. This is, again, a person-based award. So this is all about you as the investigator. So it should be clear to the reviewers that although you have mentioned collaborators, that it's your scientific vision that's being pursued. You're the one who's setting the scientific agenda.
Okay. Ravi, I'll throw this one your way, and Jean, you can support if needed. Is clinical research underrepresented in the program, and are clinical applications competitive?
Clinical research is underrepresented, but that's primarily because you don't get as many clinical research applications as we might expect. One reason we think that is that this is high risk, high reward research. And if the proposal uses human subjects, then one has to be especially careful how one does that. That being said, people have successfully submitted clinical research related New Innovator Award applications. Just have to be mindful of addressing the risks and making sure that the research will be pursued rigorously and robustly. In regard to clinical research, another recommendation we make is that in the FOA we have a link to a list of contacts at the various institutes at NIH who are experts in the clinical research policies at their respective institutes. So if you're planning to submit a clinical research related project, then we highly recommend that you look up who's the contact at the scientifically most relevant institute and speak with him or her. The primary reason for this is that if a New Innovator Award is to be made and it involves clinical research, then all the New Innovator Awards are administered by the institutes. And for an institute to administer a clinical award, a clinical research related award, that award has to comply with the clinical research policies of that particular institute. And the clinical research policies vary from institute to institute. So just in preparation, it's a very good idea to contact the person listed for that institute that's most related scientifically to your application, to discuss with him or her whether what you're proposing would conform to that institute's clinical research policies.
Okay. Next question, Ravi. And I've seen this several times come in today. How much emphasis is there on new technologies and new methods as opposed to solely building towards a scientific paradigm shift using existing methods, technologies for this award?
We do support a lot of technology development, more so than standard R01 applications, and that's the New Innovator Award and High Risk High Reward program in general is good for supporting technology development. But almost all these successful applications identify one or two important applications with which the investigator plans to test that new technology and to validate that new technology. So most successful applications have a mix of technical innovation and conceptual innovation, but the emphasis on conceptual versus technical can vary from application to application.
Okay, Ravi, back to you. Have there been small business applicants before, and have they been funded? And can you share their proposal?
Small business applicants do apply. Well, I'm not sure. I don't think we have actually, but they're very few in number, and I do not recall anyone from a small business receiving an award, but I could be wrong. And we cannot share their application on their rules regarding what's foyable or not.
But there are other examples of applications on the website.
Yes, there are examples of applications on the website, but not necessarily from small businesses.
Yeah, right. Another question along a similar vein.
If I may,
Go ahead.
One difficulty with an applicant, or one challenge with an applicant from a small business, is that this is all about scientific independence and innovation. Working at a small business, you may not have the independence to change scientific direction as you might wish to, or that you think would really benefit the science. You may be under some pressure to follow the guidance or recommendations from a scientific advisory board for the company or from the senior leadership at the company. Whereas with the New Innovator Award, it's all about the scientific independence for the awardee. So that's something you would need to address explicitly.
Okay, something along a similar vein, and I touched on it earlier, but the question came in. Are applicants from smaller teaching-oriented institutions at a significant funding disadvantage? Larger research-intensive institutions seem to have a higher rate of funding.
We are trying to improve the, Dr. Collins convened a working group to his advisory committee to the director a few years ago to assess the HR program in general. The working group found that overall the program is effective in supporting innovative, impactful research, and that there are no apparent biases that adversely affect underrepresented groups in the review processes that we use. However, this working group did identify a more fundamental issue, which is that the applicant pool does not reflect the total diversity of the research workforce, including the institutional diversity. So that is something we're trying to address through outreach efforts and by making, as a programmatic priority, the ability to invigorate innovative research broadly across the nation so that we more fully tap into the innovative potential of the country.
All right.
So bottom line is that there doesn't seem to be any bias towards small institutions, but we're trying to encourage to increase the number of applications from smaller institutions.
Okay, I'm seeing this come in multiple times, and Jean, perhaps you can answer it. Can I apply multiple times, and is there a disadvantage to doing so?
So within a single year? No, just once. One application per applicant. Can you come back next year, or if you applied last year, can you come back this year? Yes, you can. Is there a significant disadvantage? No.
And all the applications are considered new applications. So there's no such thing as a type A1 application, for example. No.
That's a good
Yeah. So
And so you shouldn't mention any previous review in your application itself. It's considered a new application, and so it should be written like a new application. It'll be reviewed like a new application.
and if you do mention a previous submission, that's grounds for administrative withdrawal. So please be sure that you don't mention any previous submission or review.
Can I submit 2 applications that do not overlap scientifically to this funding opportunity? And Jean just touched on it, but for him to repeat it again, Jean, the answer is
No.
no, you cannot. Okay. Our annual progress reports submitted for funded awards. Ravi.
Yes, they are. But since they're multi-year funded awards, the progress report is a little bit different. You will be provided the appropriate information on how to submit the annual progress report for a multi-year funded award. One additional complication with having 2 segments of funding is that near the end of the 3rd year, you would not submit a typical annual progress report, but something called a Type 4 application that would allow you to get funding for years 4 and 5. But yes, you have to submit some sort of progress report annually.
Question, do I need to have a faculty appointment before applying?
Robbie, that's
Robbie?
you.
You don't. Again, you need to have a position at the host institution by September 1st of 2022 to be eligible for the New Innovator Award. And whatever position you have should be one that allows you to apply for NIH grants such as the R01 by your institution without any sort of special waiver that confers you with the ability to submit R01 applications.
Ravi, are sub-awards allowed? And if so, where, how should they be described or indicated?
You can have sub-awards, definitely, for the New Innovator Award. You don't describe them in the budget pages. They can be described to an appropriate extent in the essay.
And final question of the eligibility category. Does receipt of this award take away ESI status?
Yes.
Yes,
Significant award. Yeah.
Okay, our next bucket or subset of questions will focus on application and submission questions. So first question, and we touched on this, can you provide an example application to look at? And they are available on the website, right, Ravi?
Correct.
Okay. For small businesses, what's the application process if the business doesn't have grant support? Ravi.
You need to follow the instructions in the FOA. There are instructions on how to get the appropriate status to apply for grants at NIH.
Okay.
Jean,
this question. Go ahead, Ravi.
But regardless of what sort of institution, you need to be sure, for example, that you have a DUNS number and the appropriate sort of status to apply for grants.
Jean, your question next. What is the purpose of designating 2 areas of science, and how do I choose between them?
I think that the purpose is so that we can do it facilitates our work in terms of when we receive just a lot of applications, we can group them off into different areas there. Some of these, and if you look again in section 4 of the FOA, you can see the 9 areas of science there. Some are quite technical. Engineering, there's some molecular biology that can be associated with different types of topics or disciplines. Other ones are more specific in terms of cancer and immunology or neuroscience. And so coupling them together gives us more information about your application, together with really seeing the goals of your application. Those three pieces of information helps us to get reviewers to be able to put them onto your as reviewers onto your application. It's important to say that as we talk about this and we talk about assigning applications, your applications to reviewers, remember that this is not meant to be spot on study section type of reviewers reviewing these applications. These are more broad. These are experts in the field, but general experts in the larger field there. So remember, when you to go back, when you're writing your application, write it so that it's not going to be only understood by a narrow sliver of science within a general topic area, that it can be understood by a general expert within a given field.
Okay, Ravi, can NIH staff help me select my areas of science?
No, we really don't do that. The general guidance that we give is that think about which set of reviewers would be able to most easily appreciate the innovation and potential impact of what you're proposing.
Okay, and following up along that similar line, should I contact an NIH staff person to review my idea prior to submission? Ravi.
You're not required to do that. You certainly can. And I talk with prospective applicants about the scope of what they're thinking, providing some low resolution feedback.
But you don't contact review staff who, because review staff are there to provide an objective review of all the applications. So we cannot provide our ideas of what makes your application better, because then we become involved in your application. We are there to be objective, and so yeah, that's if you're going to talk to anybody, talk to Ravi.
It's like separation of church and state.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Okay, Jean, are letters of recommendation required or allowed?
They're not required because they're not allowed. So no, they're not allowed in these submissions.
And what about letters of support?
No.
Not allowed, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so some questions came in about the essay, the research strategy essay. What should be the format of the research strategy essay? Let's go with Jean.
Okay, good.
I maybe Ravi.
Ravi, you want to go?
Sure. Well, I think the primary consideration is use whatever format you think will make it easy for the reader to understand what you're doing, why it's important, why it's so innovative. I think that should be our foremost consideration, to keep the reader in mind and make it easy for him or her. And practically speaking, people have used all sorts of different formats. They've been innovative in that aspect as well. We don't ask for specific aims, so often people will often frame their proposal to have a single overarching objective that they hope to achieve by the end of the project period. And to achieve that overarching objective, they will state maybe 2, 3, or 4 objectives that they need to achieve.
And we do instruct the reviewers that this is an essay. This isn't like a typical R21 or R01 where you have specific aims listed and a research strategy that really gets deep into some of the experimental details, the nuanced experimental details. As Ravi mentioned before, general experimental details, including possibly power calculation, or you want to be able to provide confidence to the reviewers that you can accomplish this science here. But again, we let them know that this is an essay and that it's not going to get extremely granular.
I was going to add something, if you can hear me now.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, something to keep in mind as well is that they are actually looking out for the innovation and novelty, as well as importance of the problem. And so, however you weave this in, that's fine. There's no set template, but you need to find a way to weave, those things actually looking out for inside your application.
Now we know you work.
Yeah. Now I'm calling on you. All right. So Imo, how large should the project be that is being proposed? And is there a penalty for being overly ambitious?
I think, an applicant has to be realistic in terms of feasibility. How do you practically convince and convey your point, in a way that a reviewer can see that this is achievable within the timeline? And so you don't want to sell yourself short. At the same time, you don't want to overshoot, yourself. And so you need to find a good balance of, putting across what you intend to achieve in a way that a reviewer, and again, keep in mind, these are PIs as well, and they know potential challenges that arise with research. And so I think keeping that in mind and perspective, with a focus on your innovation and how feasible it is to accomplish what you set out to do, with potential obstacles along the way, I think that should give you a good balance of how you approach that.
And Imo, you touched on this, the innovativeness. So a question is it better to include preliminary data in the application, or would the presence of preliminary data be counted against the innovativeness of the proposal?
That's also, I'd say, a fine line to walk, because you want to get them excited. The key thing would be to have solid premise of prior research upon that. If you feel a data would help you to really
Oh no.
But again, you don't want to show tons of data that has been published, and so there's no novelty. So it's a fine balance of how you present some new emerging concept without something that has been published and shown and kills the novelty. So you need to strike that balance as well.
Right.
You want to add something?
No, that's wonderful. That's exactly right. No.
Okay. So questions about the biosketch. Does the application need to include a biosketch? And should the information in the biosketch overlap with what is in the essay? Anyone can jump in. How about that?
Yes, the biosketch is necessary. It should not, in principle, repeat information that's provided in other parts of the application, but it can reinforce whatever is said in the other parts of the application.
Okay.
So, a general rule again, all the SF 424 application instructions must be followed, except if there's a deviation in the FOA. So the standard instructions are to include a biosketch. So follow the standard instructions regarding the biosketch.
Okay, so final question of this subcategory or subset. What is the best way to determine the appropriate PO for a DP2 proposal? Ravi?
I am the PO for all the applications. But once an award is to be made, the applications are reassigned to the scientifically most relevant institute. That institute then manages the award, and you will be assigned a program officer at that institute as well as a grants management specialist. But I have the pleasure and privilege of speaking with many prospective applicants as the program officer.
All right, next category is budget. Do I submit a budget justification? And what can be included in this budget? And Ravi, you touched on this somewhat. So if you want to give a quick 15 seconds synopsis.
Well,
Well,
again, Yeah. Again, we don't ask for much information. You need to fill out annual budget pages for each of the 5 years. The only two figures you need to provide for each year are the equipment cost for that particular year and justification if you're requesting any equipment that year, as well as the category called other direct costs for that particular year. And the two constraints for the first 3 years, the direct cost request cannot exceed $900,000. For the final 2 years, the direct cost request cannot exceed $600,000.
So following up, can the budget include the cost of collecting data abroad?
Yes.
And what does multi-year funded mean, Ravi?
Multi-year funded means that the funds are given to be used over more, intended to be used over more than one fiscal year. So for example, in the first funding segment, which is multi-year funded, we would give you the funds for years 1, 2, and 3, but give those funds at the beginning of year 1. So that's multi-year funding. You wouldn't get additional funds in year 2 and 3. You'd get everything for the first 3 years at the beginning of year 1. Similarly, for the second funding segment to cover years 4 and 5, you would get funds for at the beginning of year 4 to cover years 4 and 5.
So then with that being said, are no cost extensions allowed for unexpended funds, Ravi?
Yes, and that is something that will be a new feature for the new Innovator Awards. Previously, no cost extensions were not allowed given what's called the M rule. It's a federal statute, public statute regarding the use of multi-year funds. But providing funding in these two segments will allow no cost extensions from the second segment of funding.
Is the award transferable if I change institutions?
Yes, it is. It's not uncommon for people to change institutions, especially when they're still pretty early in their career. So we do see change of institutions.
All right, that was the final question of the budget section. Not many questions there. We're going to move on to the final subset of our questions, which is all about the review. So Jean and Imo, if we have you, you will take center stage. Ravi, don't go anywhere. I will still need you. Okay, so question number 1. Who reviews my application and are they subject matter experts? And since we touched on this,
Right.
10 seconds.
They're members from the scientific community, experts from the scientific community. They are general experts within your area of science. They may not be exactly topic experts. So write them so a general audience, a general expert audience can understand it.
And Ravi, will the roster of reviewers be posted on the new Innovator website?
Yes, once those become available, we do post them. So you can go through the archive, see who served as reviewers in previous years.
Jean or Imo, may I request to exclude a specific reviewer with whom I have a conflict of interest?
They could always write that. I think it's written in the funding opportunity announcement that if there is someone that you think that you may be in conflict with, or that otherwise you don't want reviewing your application, you can post them in the assignment request form area there. We will determine. We make the final decision whether determining whether it is indeed a conflict of interest, so we may follow up with you on these types of things.
And for the investigator review criterion, what constitutes an ongoing record of accomplishments that have advanced their field?
I think that showing indications of your success and accomplishments typically are in awards that you've received and primarily publications, your work publications from the past. So I think that these are evidence that you're successful and that you have innovative thought and it contributes to this strengths in your application.
And I'm seeing several of these questions come in, which is, what will reviewers focus on the most?
The three core criteria. It's the importance of the scientific topic, the scientific or clinical or basic science topic. It's the importance of the topic and how they address it. Do they address it in an innovative fashion? Do you design a research strategy that shows innovation? Do you show a scientific experimental approach that utilizes innovative concepts or technology? And have you, through this application, have you demonstrated the fact that the PI, that the applicant has an innovativeness associated with them? So it's based on those three criteria as to how well this application does.
And also, if I may add, it's not uncommon to really emphasize how, your work could potentially impact that field, because it's really about innovation. And so being able to really make the case as to how this would make a difference in the field, I think would really help, your cause.
We try to tell people really answering two questions. Should it be done? Should the NIH, should the scientific community, should this nation be excited about having this research going forward in terms of the importance of the project? Should it be done? And then can it be done? And in this particular case, can it be done in an innovative and clever way?
Okay, next question. Is it okay to contact previous new innovator reviewers to review my grant application prior to submission?
I think that, and Robbie, feel free to jump in if and when you need, but I think it's getting someone to look at your application, getting an experienced researcher in the field to look at your application is always a good thing. Identifying someone as a new innovator reviewer, assuming if you do it after, if you contact this reviewer after your application has been submitted, that of course steps on a lot of integrity issues, and that is against the policy. If you want to do it before, and if say someone at your institution is there and have them look at it, that's fine. Identifying someone from the roster and sending it to them to look at it, it may be okay. I would say that you would need to identify that person and put them in as a conflict of interest into your assignment request form, because they would no longer be able to review your application. But I think in general, you want getting someone and getting feedback regarding your application. It can always be helpful. Specifically identifying someone that's reviewed may be okay, but you should disclose that this person has looked at your application.
Okay,
Right.
and looking at the time, Robbie, do you want to add something? Go
Just
ahead.
And the previous reviewers are still bound by their confidentiality agreements.
Right.
So making such a request may impose a bit of awkwardness for the reviewer. And in addition, some general guidance that I give is that I think it's a really good idea to give maybe a 1 or 2 page summary of what you're proposing to colleagues that you respect who are well outside your field. If you're doing cardiovascular research, then maybe giving it to a respected colleague who's in neuroscience or doing behavioral research or hardcore structural biology. Because again, knowledgeable people who are outside the field should be able to get it pretty quickly by what you're proposing is so innovative and impactful. So don't just try to target people in the field, but also ask.
I'm going to squeeze in one more question, which is, would we find out if we're one of the finalists after stage 1 review?
Yes. I think Emo, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, we typically send out emails after the first stage review to both finalists and non-finalists, just to notify them of the next steps we do.
Perfect. Okay, so that's the end of this subset of questions. As we wrap up, I would like to thank everyone for joining us, as well as our informed panel. A quick reminder, the webinar has been recorded and will be posted on the website at commonfund.nih.gov/new innovator. Please do make use of the New Innovator mailbox with any additional questions that you may have, and those that we didn't get to that were in the Q&A box. We look forward to receiving lots of innovative applications for this funding opportunity. Thank you again and have a wonderful afternoon. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.